If you tell us how many properties you have, next sentence needs to be, what is the value of your portfolio? That's what I want to actually know.
So the only feedback you ever get are from the people who complain about the development.
For example, in Sydney, you've got the mountains, Cronulla. That's the Sydney area. There's not any more new land that they can create out of that section. So the price is only going to continue to go one direction. It's cold today, man.
It is a bit cold.
It is.
It's a bit cold in here.
It is, man.
But just watch out. Just cover yourself.
Sorry.
Is there a bit of extra light in here?
It's rude to point, Chris.
Do you want to take your jacket? It's cool.
No, is the jacket okay? Is the jacket all right?
Yeah, 100%.
As long as you're cozy, man.
Man, that's a trendy jacket.
I normally just wear the black t-shirt, but I'm just wearing the black jacket now as well. It's just very easy. Is it Elon Musk or Zuckerberg just wears the same? No, who was it?
I think
Zuckerberg.
it's all of them.
Yeah.
Zuckerberg and from Apple.
Oh yeah,
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, just wear the same clothes
right.
every day. So it's
That's
one
the way
less
to get
decision
rich.
you have to make.
Remove decision making.
So I'm doing that. I'm removing decisions.
Unnecessary
Good.
decisions.
Not yet rich, but I'm sure if I keep wearing black t-shirts
Exactly.
every day,
You'll get that.
we will get there. But falling short of the bank account balance,
You're not also falling.
which
really
is a good
short.
segue. Don't steal my segues.
You've done
I'm
it.
the segue guy.
You are Mr.
That's
Segway.
fine.
Come on,
You take it.
man.
Oh,
That's
good, let me have it.
mate, it's the jacket.
It's the jacket.
Yeah, it's the jacket.
Today's episode, guys, it's about how housing targets are falling short already. So government just implementing these.
It's a terrible segue. You know.
It was a very bad segue. But inspired by an article that you found, Sav,
Yes.
from 9news.com. And the title was Situation is Critical. Number of home approvals falls weeks out from the start of housing targets. So we've got off to a terrible start. I've asked ChatGPT to give me a summary as well.
They can sponsor the podcast.
ChatGPT is our new sponsor.
OpenAI.
Australia's housing
Yes.
crisis deepens as construction approvals fell by 0.3% in April 2024, which doesn't sound like a lot, but over time it will be, with only 13,078 new dwellings approved. So this figure falls drastically short of the 20,000 monthly approvals needed to meet the federal budget target of 1.2 million new homes by 2029. Industry leaders stress urgent government action to address approval delays, labour shortages and rising material costs to avert further escalation in rents and home prices. So thank you, ChatGPT. I'm Michael Carboni. You can call me Carbs. This is Property Now. And as always, Chris Ferris, we're here to talk about the housing shortages today. How are you, man?
Good, mate. How are you?
I love how your new hairstyle goes the other way.
Yeah, just it's not short. It's just confused. So it just goes that way now.
It's so strange.
So-
Like, it's a big decision to like
Is it?
actually.
It's just hair, is it?
Yeah, but it's been going one way.
Changes his hair every day.
I know, but inspired by
It's a big decision
Jason,
for me.
man,
Yeah.
Jason the He-Man.
Jason has like 10 photos every day. He's like,
Which haircut?
This is what you got to do when you're in witness protection.
Not be
Yeah,
on a
go on a
podcast
podcast.
every week. Welcome, He-Man.
No, good to be here, man. Thanks.
Good to be He-Man.
Yeah, that's it.
That's good. Whoa. And Sav Lobe, you're back with us as well. Good to have you back.
Yes, thank you. Excited to be back.
Talking about housing supply, and as we always seem to, and how the targets are falling short. But let's start with Australia's favourite property segment. Do you know what it is?
prop talk.
Prop talk. Let's start.
Have we invented a category there?
We definitely have.
We did, yeah.
Like prop talk?
Definitely.
Yeah,
Prop
love
talk.
It's definitely our own category.
Love it.
I'm pretty sure we made that up.
it.
If we
Great.
haven't, sorry
Is it
to
trending? Like,
whoever
is
we stole it from.
hashtag-
Oh, yes. Hashtag prop talk.
So
People
Paige.
should send some prop talks in.
That's
as
a
well.
great idea.
That'd
We
be
do. That's actually
hashtag
pretty
prop
good.
Talk.
So the idea is really, while we're getting this up, is we want people following us on, in particular, Instagram and TikTok. Share your prop talks with us, and we'll get them. We'll talk about it. I want a whole episode of prop talks. Did I say that already?
Yeah.
Have I already said that?
Yes. Come
I
on,
think he wants
guys.
an episode of prop talks.
I would love an episode of prop talks. Whatever is less planning for me, really.
Oh, what? There's planning?
Oh,
You're in a mood. You're in a mood today. You're in an excellent mood today.
It's the haircut, I'm telling you.
He's,
Man, are you ever going to be able
no,
to do this?
I don't know what I'm doing. Let's prop talk, guys. Let's prop talk.
It's part of the
Let's
fun.
go.
Guys, just so you know, this could make you hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars.
I'm listening.
So let's go easy maths right now. Let's say we found a property worth $1 million, right? Let's add up the amount of repayments that you need per year. So $1 million, you told me to times it by 0.8. And that's because 20% is what you're going to place as a deposit. Then you said you got to times it by 0.06.
That's the interest rate, guys.
You have to pay $48,000 a year for this property. Now you have to calculate how much rent you can get from this property to cover that cost. So let's say it's $1,000 a week times 52, but don't act like this is all yours. You've got things to pay for, such as, servicing and council rates and strata fees. So you go times 0.8, and now that's actually what you have in your pocket. So I owe $48,000 a year on this property, but I'm only getting $41,600 on this property. So Sanjay, good or bad deal?
Bad deal.
Because I'm going to be down $6,400 a year.
All right.
I love
You
how
always know it's
started.
going to be good when they say easy math.
Easy
Yeah,
math.
yeah, yeah.
Someone says easy math.
Oh
like,
my goodness.
ooh.
Easy
And it'll
math.
make you
I need
hundreds
2
of thousands.
calculators. That's how easy
I
it
think
is.
you had three. I think you had three.
How many calculators do you need for easy math?
Three.
3.
Look,
So I know we talk about hairstyles today. Mad hairstyles, these guys, whoever their barbers are, fantastic. The locker room chat. What do you think, Chris?
Oh, look, it is easy math, right? It's very basic. So they've taken the property price, times it by 80%. That's what their loan is going to be. So they're assuming that you've got stamp duty, you've got a 20% deposit already.
Yep.
Fine. Let's go past that. And then they've just times it by that loan amount of 80% times 0.6 being an interest rate. So again, I'm assuming they're talking interest only, Jace. So no principal and interest. And they're looking at, in a roundabout way, what they're trying to say is positively geared properties versus
negative geared.
That's all they're trying to
I'm
say.
surprised they didn't say
Like,
that.
just-
Yeah.
So what he's just proven there is that property that he's selected is just a negatively geared property. And what that means is it's losing 6,400 every year. So they're not making money. So they're just chasing positively geared properties.
So he said, yeah. So the guy with the cool guy with the backwards hat.
Yeah.
Bad deal. This is a bad deal because I'm losing $5,000 or $6,000 a
Because
year.
it's negatively geared.
Yeah.
Which is negatively geared.
Yeah.
Is it a bad deal?
Oh, look, not necessarily. I think it's oversimplifying the situation.
Yeah.
Because there's that two schools of thought when it comes to investment. You've got someone like Jack Henderson that we featured, I think, last week or a couple of weeks ago on Prop Talk. He's very big on the capital growth side of things, right? And his argument is, yes, if you find a positively geared property, you're making $200 a week, for example, on it. In a year, that's not going to make you financially independent because you're getting $200 every single week. Whereas a property that's increasing in capital growth, let's say you're losing $6,000 a year, but it's gone up in value by $50,000 every year or $30,000 every year, in 10 years or 15 years time, who's going to be better off when that person sells it with that capital gain versus the person making $200 every single week, and potentially that property hasn't increased in value, right? Because sometimes it's easy to find properties that are positively geared because they may be cheaper, in potentially regional areas where there isn't so much demand for it. And you're getting good rent, and you're putting in a 20% deposit. I mean, you could put in a 50% deposit and be positively geared as well, right? You could put in a 90% deposit.
You could put in 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
You could pay 40 in cash.
Correct.
Yes.
But if
It's
that property
positively
doesn't go up in value,
Yeah.
I don't think the rent is really going to be the thing that makes a difference in your overall
long-term side of things.
Yeah.
wealth creation. Yeah.
That's
so
a really good point.
but at the same time, you can also say that you can find a property that's positively geared and it's going up in value.
Yeah.
Right. That's the best of both worlds, but that's difficult to find.
Very hard to find.
So usually that's where I think people need to work on what the objective is in property investment, because you might have a lot of income and you can support that negative cash flow, right? Because you're also getting tax deductions. So you're not necessarily losing $6,000. You're losing $6,000, which reduces your taxable income.
That was
The
before tax
ATO,
loss as well.
correct, is subsidizing maybe 30-40% of that $6,000.
Yeah.
Right. So you're actually chasing more capital growth, whereas someone might have had a couple of properties, done really well with the capital growth side of things, but they're now capped with their lending to buy their third or their fourth one. They need a property that produces more income. So that's also the argument between residential versus commercial, because we all know commercial generally delivers higher rental return. So you can buy a $750,000 industrial warehouse that earns rent of $60,000 a year. but it's relatively going to be flat in the value side of things.
Yeah.
All right, over the long term compared to a residential property, which might only give you $30,000, $35,000 a year.
So it's oversimplified.
That makes so much sense.
Correct.
It's very simple, man.
Yeah.
Oversimplified. The
Yeah.
other thing too is obviously saving up that full 20%. There's opportunity costs there potentially
Stamp
as well.
duty.
Stamp duty. But I guess it depends on where you are at in the journey as well. Like
Correct.
you might want to be chasing growth. You might want to be chasing yield, depending on if you're an what stage you're at in your investment journey.
Yeah.
So probably a little bit too simple there.
Correct.
And I would suggest that most property journeys start negatively geared.
Correct.
And they build eventually over time, they become positively geared
As you pay it off.
as you pay it off. So, I don't know, Sav. Any further
No,
thoughts?
I agree with that, because I think ultimately if you've got capital in the property that you're paying off, that's going to help you so much more, especially if you're an investor. So having that as an initial goal makes sense rather than just having it positively geared.
Yeah, that's exactly
so
right.
by the sounds of it, they've just chased. It said something about him building a 45 property portfolio or something. It sounds like he's just chased it with positively geared properties. It's obviously helping on the income. If you can find something that's positively geared, it helps generate further income. So you're not having negatively geared property taking away serviceability income, and it helps, I suppose, to accumulate more properties. But if he's getting a 20% deposit every time, they're relying on property prices to continue going up, which, again, if that's what you're relying on, perhaps chasing something that's just purely positively geared is not going to get the same capital growth outcomes that needed to actually continue and accumulate a massive.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
portfolio.
Because if the properties don't go up in value, you can't pull the equity out, and then you can't use that equity to buy the next property. But I also have a thing with when people sort of talk about how many properties they have.
Yeah.
I've got 45.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have 45 properties that's worth 150K each
Yeah.
versus someone who's got 3 properties worth $2 million each.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
the number of properties don't always mean you have a lot of wealth, because that also means a lot more admin, a lot more administration, a lot more council rates,
Yeah.
everything else.
I agree. And that's a challenge to the property bros out there. If you tell us how many properties you have, next sentence needs to be, what is the value of your portfolio? That's what I want to actually know.
Yeah.
Let's compare both of those things.
I like that.
And if you're doing basic maths of 2 calculators, and that's
Easy maths.
easy maths on
Three.
2 calculators, 3 calculators, maybe you need to look at some other things as well
Get a
before you buy your property.
Get a spreadsheet.
Like,
Seriously.
let's go beyond the calculators.
All you need
guys.
is a computer,
Yeah.
isn't it?
The banks use
Just one. Just one.
One computer.
That's done fair advantage.
2 phones, 2 calculators. Remember when teachers used to say, you need to learn maths because you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket, and now you do.
They
Anyway,
were wrong.
terrible segue. That's not a segue. Guys, today's topic today, we've already alluded to it. It's about the falling housing supply shortage. We saw it on 9news.com. We've actually seen it everywhere. Housing supply crisis deepens as construction approvals fell by 0.3%. So basically, Albanese government, they're targeting 1.2 million new homes by 2029. And already 1 month into this, we're short by 7,000 homes this month. If this trend continues, not good.
It's going to continue.
It's going to continue.
It is,
So,
yeah.
guys, let's talk about what are the core issues here to start with. All right. So,
Let's go back a couple.
Let's
of
go
steps.
back a
Let's go
step.
back to the beginning.
yeah,
Back to the future.
you host.
Yeah,
Story time.
So I think when Mr. Albanese, landlord from hell, when he announced this originally, it was originally a target of 1 million,
Yeah.
and then they just let's grab another 200,000 homes to chuck into the.
I have a solution. 200,000
It's
more.
like at 1.2. So there was an additional 200 that was thrown into the mix. But really, I don't think they were ever going to even achieve the million, let alone the 1.2 houses they wanted, new dwellings they want to build nationally. I think that's number one. Historically, the rate that we'd need to be building at to achieve 1.2 in the next 5 years would need to be about 30 to 40% higher than what we've been building in the last 10 years across every state. So again, this was, it's aspirational targets, and it's politics, right? To say that let's pull this number basically out of our ass, right? 1.2 million based off nothing, because I don't think they've really got the foundations to historically even say we can build this number of homes versus what's happening in the future to get them up and running. So, with inflation where it's at, cost of construction, builders falling over, when did they actually think that this was going to be achievable? That's actually the wider question that I've got, because we look at the actual housing approval numbers. It's one thing to get them approved, but then it's the next thing to actually get them commenced and get them started under construction.
Yeah, so dig into that, right? Because government can say, here's the number we're going for. Okay, great. How do we get there? All right, they've given some more approval. So some of maybe the red tape and hurdles in DA approvals is probably like easing a little bit, but developers and builders aren't building. They're still not building. Why? Cost of supply materials, cost of construction, labor shortages.
Yeah.
You know, so we might get 40,000 approvals this month, but that doesn't mean 40,000 new homes are being built or have gotten started.
The wider problem that having this 1.2 million target is they actually have no control over the outcome of this target.
Yeah.
They think they do, but they actually have no control. So you can say that we want to build 1.2 million houses, but without the industry being able to deliver those houses, it's just not going to happen.
Yep.
And industry, it's tough at the moment for industry to get these out of the ground. I mean, we saw an episode last week or the week before, we talked on, home buyers not being able to get their land, whether that's the developer's fault or not, but that's a symptom of where we are in the economic cycle, where developers can't get their projects out of the ground, whether it's a funding issue, whether it's cost of construction, whether it's availability of labour, or the feasibilities just don't stack, which is the majority. There's a stack of DA approvals out there that have already been approved that are not getting built.
Well, every day there's a new builder going bust. Like literally, like there's stories that they're not even all getting published anymore because there's so many builders.
Well, that's a problem as well. And I just going back to the approvals. So there's an article that came out the other day where there's 100,000 approvals that are sitting there that can't be delivered. So there is already a backlog of housing approvals that can't get delivered.
So these approvals, do they expire? Or say, for example, you're the builder, you got the DA or the approval, and the feasibility is not stacking up anymore. So what happens? Do you just sit on it? Or?
Yeah, depending on the type of approval, it could last for 2 or 5 years.
Right.
DA consent, so development application consent, before it lapses. So that developer or that builder that has that DA approval, whether it's a house or a block of apartments, it can either, depending on the location and jurisdiction, could be 2 or 5 years that it stays current before it lapses. And once it lapses, it's done. You have to go back to council and
is it true, like, if you just start a little bit on the site, that you can
activate? Yeah.
Right.
So you need. So that's the development application. Then you need to activate the DA. So that it varies state to state, and jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but it could simply mean getting a construction certificate or demolition of the property or starting some aspect of the development application to start the process.
Oh, so there's a way that enables the developer just to kind of keep it
active. But you still need to it still needs to get delivered, right? So there is so you've got a couple of issues. You've got historical approvals that are there, which aren't getting built, and then you've got current approvals that are falling, because there's no point. Developers probably sitting there going, well, I've got all these backlog projects. What's the point of going to the next step to get them approved? And they're not getting delivered. So the aspirational target of 1.2, it was a target that they never had any control over. So why come out and have this target when you actually don't have physical control to actually deliver, especially at a time when social housing is at a record low, well, per capita as well. So if you don't have any control over what the delivery of that outcome is, why is that an election promise?
And they keep kicking the can down the road. So 2029, when we're meant to reach this 1.2, is Albanese still going to be the Prime Minister? Is Labor going to still be in government? So it's probably going to be the next guy that says, oh no, actually we now need 1.5, and how do we get there? And we're going to get there in 2035. They just keep kicking it down the road. Do you see a solution here?
I don't know. I think because these targets are set by federal government, and then they need to be basically reached, these quotas need to be reached by local governments, there's just a gap in between federal or state and then the local government. So maybe instead of having the local governments and councils go over these quotas and trying to, work towards these quotas, maybe we need to have an extra layer. So there's such a thing called urban planning. So that looks at a city as a whole. So something that's done much more in Europe. So they look at city planning better than just at local councils getting, these projects, approving these projects, because I think at the moment there's something missing there. That might be an option. So looking more at like the cities holistically.
Can we dig into that? Because that's actually a really interesting point. Because you're right. You've got this federal target, then you've got this awkward state government in there, and then the more awkward local government that's in there that has to deliver. And, if you're a local councillor within your region, development is usually not wanted by residents. So it's not popular to have huge amounts of development in those local areas.
It's a NIMBY.
Yeah, it's an NIMBY. And it's moving to YIMBY.
YIMBY.
Not in my backyard. Yes, in my backyard. But you're actually 100% right, Sam. So you've got this disconnect between the different governing bodies where federal wants this particular target, but local councils are not really that incentivized to do so. Then you've got state governments in there trying to also deliver on housing supply.
Yeah.
So there's a huge disconnect between the different bureaucrats and politicians.
And I think it comes in with infrastructure as well, because yes, you can have local infrastructure in certain areas, but I think to meet the housing demand, we need to think of it holistically, in terms of infrastructure as well across Sydney.
It's going to be an interesting city, Sydney in particular.
Yeah.
We often talk about Sydney because that's where we live, right? In my local council, typically mostly houses, a lot of townhouses, but there's the biggest apartment complexes would be 4, maybe 5 stories high. In my suburb, there's been no new apartment complexes in a long time. They're all sort of old walk-ups. But a few suburbs over, there's a lot more development happening, but they're all 5-6 stories high max. But there's going to be the new metro there. So there's this whole new metro line. So the infrastructure that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And there's just been a DA approval 2 weeks ago for a 16-floor apartment complex next to the metro.
There you go.
How do you feel about that as a local resident?
So for me, it's not my it's a few suburbs over from me. So my suburb is technically untouched. It's, God's country, let's say. So it's going to be, that suburb's fine. But no, Nelson's Bay. But there's been a lot of backlash from the locals saying, what do you mean a 16-story apartment complex? It's going to stick up out of nowhere. It's going to just look like the dog's you-know-whats. So there's a lot of backlash there, but you can see that, we're going to have this new metro. There's going to be more activation from a retail sort of aspect as well. You want more people around there as well. So it actually makes a lot of sense to be doing that in pockets and to be planning it that way. Just getting that YIMBY, NIMBY sort of...
I find that the people that will be complaining, the local residents there, will be the same people that wonder why their kids don't live within 20, 30 minutes of them and wonder why in future there's no nurses, teachers, police, fire that live in that local area because they can't. So then when their services aren't there that they need, they'll start complaining.
They'll also be enjoying the cafe, the pizzeria downstairs.
Well, the person that's probably serving them in the cafe probably
Yeah.
has to travel 30 or 40 minutes to get to work.
Yeah.
So you probably want when the cafes start to close because they realise they can't get staff because those staff don't live in those local areas anymore. They'll probably realise that that's a huge problem.
We see it a lot. Areas another areas like Burwood, where it's all of a sudden there's a few high skyscrapers, but there's
more than a few.
Anyone that I joke around. We're driving west to see some family on the weekend, and all of a sudden you see Parramatta. And it's I wonder if anyone travelling to Sydney for the first time was just driving on the M4 and saw Parramatta, they'd probably think that was the city. I don't know. And then you drive past home.
There's pockets.
Sydney Olympic Park, and you're okay. Or you see, there's but we're going to have more of these pockets where there's just 16-story skyscrapers and then a house down the road.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's almost, I don't know, Sydney, probably the worst master plan in history when you compare it to other cities,
Yeah, I think we really need to think about more density because, yes, everyone wants a house and I get it. I mean, if you invested in a house, you don't want your value to go down because there's apartment blocks being built around you. But I think that's the only solution, really, to have more dense.
To me, if I see
Absolutely.
16-story apartments and I own a block of land in the suburb next door, I think that my property value is going to go up, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's right.
there's
Yeah.
less.
It gets rezoned or something.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's a lot to think about and unpack. So
Just on Sav's point even further. So the local, I've always found it. I don't want to say strange, but I'm going to say strange. I've always found it strange that local governments, so local councils, and this might be unpopular, that local councils have the planning controls.
yeah,
I've always found that really strange. Hey, we'll collect your rates, we'll collect your bins, and we're going to decide how many thousand people. It's fucking strange.
it
right?
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Super strange as to why local government have control of that section. I feel like it should be a state government function.
Yeah.
with local government input, but housing needs to be delivered by state government.
I agree with that because,
Yeah.
and that goes back to what we just said, right? Sydney is a mishmash of planning because you got local council over here looking after their section, and then like there's a invisible line, and a different group of people look after what happens literally next door. You can't plan it that
We're
way.
part of a collective society where we can't just have groups of people that exclude certain locations from development. And that's what happens with local governments having control of it, because they get elected by those local people, and they're almost the voice of a select group within their electorate, and they also have the control of the planning.
They're the voice of the people that complain,
Yeah.
right? Because whenever you put something
I
out
like that.
in the public, right, and you get so what's that called? You know, when they do a proposal, like council puts that out for feedback, right? Like
they call
community
it,
feedback or whatever.
Consultation.
Right, consultation. You only hear from the people that complain, right? So, for example, you're talking about building the apartments that the essential workers are going to live in or need. You don't get they don't get an opportunity to provide
They're
feedback.
too busy travelling, man.
Right.
That's the problem.
Yeah, no one asks them because you don't even know who they are. So the only feedback you ever get are from the people who complain about the development.
Yeah.
So that I think is broken.
I think there needs to be a shift. The federal government have these targets. It gets filtered into government. State government should be the one. I mean, they're in charge of infrastructure, right? So if you're in charge of the infrastructure, building the train from Leppington all the way out to the city or whatever, why is it then up to the local councils to decide the density that goes around that? It should be up to the state government who's providing the infrastructure and working towards
Absolutely.
infrastructure with consultation from local government. So the local electorate, they're elected to give the people in that local area a voice, and the councillors that are elected in local government should take that voice, the collective voice, to state government to talk on the targets and housing density requirements within that local area. They shouldn't have control of it.
And I think
That's
it's
the
starting to
for
happen
sure.
though. Let's keep it local again. So Min's government, New South Wales, they've got the patent book, which is making DA approvals but we haven't really seen that in
So
action
the
yet.
councils are still fighting back to
But
all of this.
the councils do
And-
fight back.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they can't fight back, but my point is it stops the progress of the city.
But it's
And then you get points
exactly.
where
It's the city. It's not the local.
But you've got the loud
can't-
minority
Yeah.
complaining about where am I going to park my car
Yeah.
versus like long-term thinking and
Yeah.
infrastructure.
the only way to have long-term thinking is to look at the city as a whole, as Sav's
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
You can't look at like piece by piece. If I'm doing a 1,000-piece puzzle, I'm not worried about the one piece. I'm worried about the 1,000 pieces and where they all fit in.
Yeah.
Like you can't look at it in isolation. piece by
I
piece.
agree with that. I know you thought that was controversial. I don't know if that's something
Makes
to
a lot of
disagree
Well,
with.
sense.
some people probably
Yeah.
won't like that, but I
Have you
think
considered running for?
definitely not.
Crystal Prime Minister.
Look, we're going to build a platform for Chris to run for PM one day. But let's talk about then. So, look, we've industry is making a lot of noise as well at the moment. So a lot of developers, associations, builders, etc., because they're saying, look, we agree with 1.2 million in principle, but how are we supposed to get there with all these other, and we've already talked about all the problems, DA hurdles, labour shortages, material costs, plan, everything, etc., etc. How can industry and government be collaborating to solve this problem? Because that's what needs to happen. Government can say, okay, we're going to get here. Now industry, how can we help you get to this goal? This episode is brought to you by Coposit, where 10K means you can buy a brand new home. So check out the website, coposit.com.au now.
Yeah, the government can put all the targets they want, but it's at the end of the day, the one that's going to be delivering it is industry. Industry have to take charge of this and get it delivered from, whether it's from banks to developers to builders to contractors to employees to all these groups. They need to be the ones in charge of delivering this housing supply at the end of the day. So I know there's think tanks and talk fests out there about how
You
to
love a think tank,
how to
James.
get it
I
delivered.
love a think tank. Yeah, committees.
A committee.
Yeah, beautiful committees.
write a paper.
New housing committees being set up to review the housing committee paper from last time.
And then
It's
a
a
committee
talk
to
fest.
review. The
yeah,
committee's
to review. Yep.
It's a talk fest, and then in reality, what's happening is approvals are going down, construction commencements are going down, completions are going down. All of this is happening while housing has never been spoken about more than what it is currently, and then all the indicators are pointing down. It's mind-boggling.
So what about the issue around the shortage of labour? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like,
Well-
why is there a shortage of labour? Like, aren't we bringing in record levels of migrants?
we're bringing the wrong people. In.
Yeah.
The wrong people
Ooh.
in terms of their skills.
Yeah.
You're already here, man. It's cool. No, but...
We're bringing the wrong people that have the wrong skills.
Yeah.
in. So it's services based where people are coming in. We're not bringing tradies in. We're not
I think,
bringing
I think we spoke about
contractors
this
in.
before. Yeah, we're looking at like, is it medical professionals and services and all these sorts of
And
things,
tech.
and IT and tech, right? Which is fine, but we've got to bring in tradies. The other we seem
Skilled
to
labour.
we seem to be trying to keep a lot of the skilled labour here. So there's been a lot of emphasis on TAFEs and like tradie courses and all that sort of thing, which is great, but it takes time to build these people up and train these people. Whereas if we could get some of these people in straight away, it would make a big
But where did
difference.
the shortage come from, though?
I think it was
because these
post-
things have always been in place,
I
right?
would
Like
assume-
apprenticeships.
I
Or
would
whatever.
assume it's post-COVID.
Infrastructure.
Yeah, go.
Government infrastructure. They're all being sucked up by, I'm building an airport out,
Yeah, that's true as well.
I'm building tunnels, they're all getting sucked up. And if, someone holding a lollipop can get paid 200 grand a year, why do you want to be a skilled trade if you can just sit there and
a lollipop.
hold the stop sign or the slow sign? There's been recent where that they're getting 200k a year.
200k to hold the lollipop sign.
Yeah.
Oh,
but-
I'm changing
Yeah, I
jobs.
think that's assuming working all these penalty rates and hours
it's-
and
it's
stuff
working
like that.
nights and all that kind of
Right.
stuff.
Yeah,
So-
but still, it's a really high wage.
My
Yeah.
point is like,
Working nights could be a side hustle.
Mm.
That's
you're
interesting.
thinking different nights. He's thinking working different nights as well.
Anyway.
So I
No,
think
okay.
like it's just the skills shortage, and it's been sucked up by infrastructure. So government infrastructure that's building. So you're also at record levels of infrastructure production and commencements and starts, and then you're also wondering where did all the skilled labour go? Well, you're sucking them up in government projects.
We're seeing a good example, Badgerys Creek Airport, right? A lot of work, it's taken a long time, but there's a lot of trucks and a lot of people digging and a lot of things happening out there. There's a lot of dirt out there.
A lot of dirt out there.
But these could be people that could be working on new subdivisions and things like that as well. And a lot of them would have been working on subdivisions prior to the airport works
Well, like,
commencing.
but if you're a builder building a residential house, and you're trying to get a tradie onto the job, and that tradie is pricing or can get two jobs, working for a builder or the government, and guarantee payment and easy working conditions and whatnot, they're going to take that government job. That's the other problem.
What if we take a step back and say that government needs to step up a bit more in terms of
Explain.
public housing. It doesn't necessarily have to be for people that are not that don't have a job. It's just making housing more affordable. Government putting in money to help developers get their projects off the ground, and maybe taking a cut of the profit that goes back into infrastructure. It is a system that works very well overseas. Is that maybe a solution?
So do you see, because there's been discussion about a government-run developer builder that pretty
Yes.
much runs that. It would be a no-profit organisation.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
used to have that
They
Yeah.
did have that? When?
back. Landcom.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Landcom used to be land, and I don't know if they did apartment developer.
But
New South Wales.
You could see government maybe joint venturing with developers on some things
Absolutely.
like that
That's
to have
right.
an element of,
Yeah,
but
if we're talking about labor conditions and people rather working for the government, why if we create more
I think
jobs
it'll help
through
supply.
government?
I always struggle with the affordability part and make housing cheaper. I always struggle with that because I just don't think it's in government's interest for housing to be cheaper. That's the unfortunate reality.
especially when it's a 10-11 trillion dollar industry at the moment, when you look at the combined
Yeah.
Aussie property
I
portfolios.
suppose there's conflicting interests. It's like, okay, we need to build more houses, but we also want to benefit from building those houses.
But you're onto something here with the labour shortage, right? Like Badgerys Creek Airport, and even that, like the planning of that, like the airport's going to be there, but all of the housing and infrastructure around it is not happening, like to plan. So we're missing a big opportunity there as well.
I think if we're going to bring migrants in, bring the right type of migrants in. Like particularly tech, like there's companies where you can, like I can get someone from overseas to work for the company from a tech perspective. They don't have to be here necessarily. But a construction worker needs to be here.
Yeah.
They need to be physically on the tools. You can't work from home.
Yeah.
Construction doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
Unless you're building your own home.
well,
There's always a way, Chris. There's always a way. Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's
Well done. TK.
clip it, Peach. Clip it. But definitely bringing in the right, because we talk about this as well. Like the migrant levels are probably too high, and we're talking about that a lot. But is it bringing the people with the right skill sets
For what we
in?
need right now, right?
Yeah, for what we need right now. But then do we get to a point, and again, maybe it's tomorrow's problem, but Badgerys Creek Airport is done and all of these workers come back into the market. And then we've got too many. Look, there's always going to be
I don't think
infrastructure.
there'll be too many because competition helps drive price.
Exactly.
If there's no competition, price goes up. If there's multiple competition, so there's multiple tradies vying for that one job, price can come down, and that helps on the affordability side. But in terms of just the actual prices, so prices coming down, I think anyone waiting for prices to come down substantially, probably going to keep waiting.
Because I mean, the housing supplies, it's the house people, but is it affordable housing that we need to supply for, or just housing?
Look, but the apartment,
it's a good point.
it's housing these people. The 16 level apartment complex potentially being built at the Metro near me.
Yeah.
Those apartments are going to be a lot cheaper than the 3 or 4 bedroom house or
Of
the
course.
townhouse, right?
Yeah.
So we're able to house more people in an area where people want to live. Like,
yeah, if it's affordable,
you know,
exactly. But it's the affordability that's going to help people, not necessarily that there's more houses.
yeah, look, true. And you look at price points, like you look at areas like the Northern Beaches in Sydney,
Yeah.
and we were talking about this the other day, but, you know, there's an apartment complex where you can get like 4-bedroom homes for like 1.5 million.
Yeah.
Which sounds crazy, 4-bedroom
Yeah.
apartments.
Yeah.
But the alternative, if you want to live in that area, the alternative is a house for $4 million.
Yeah.
You know, so it is more affordable. And if people want to be there, then there is an option for them to be there.
Are we
sure.
calling
For
1.5 mil affordable?
Well,
Is
it's
that what
more
we're doing?
affordable than
For
4 million.
4-bedroom.
It's more affordable than 4 million. But if you,
Yeah.
but Chris, if you want to live, so you got to. This is where you got to, and we've spoken about this too. This is where, say, you're a family of 4 or 5. You got to decide, hey, do I want to? If you've grown up in Northern Beaches, for example, do I want to stay in this area, or do I want a backyard, and et cetera, et cetera? And then you're going to go spend the 1.5 out
sure.
in Western Sydney.
I mean,
or
adding
something
more
like that.
kids, you've got to budget that.
But this
in
is
as
a
well.
balance,
It's
right?
like-
We also can't.
That's probably why this is way off topic. That's probably why people aren't having as many kids.
For sure.
'Cause they can't
Definitely.
afford it.
For
'Cause
sure.
It's not the kid itself. Yeah, they're
No.
expensive, whatever. They're not that expensive. It's to
my
house
kids are
the
pretty
kid.
expensive.
Exactly.
It's not
Yes.
necessarily like the food, whatever. Like,
For sure.
Who cares?
Yeah.
But it's more the housing aspect of it. To get
Yeah.
a 2-bedroom apartment, maybe you can have 1 or 2 children in that, versus a 3-bedroom apartment to allow
Exactly.
you to have 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 kids. That additional bedroom is probably can be
Half a
100 to
million.
600,000 or $1
Yeah.
million, depending on when the location.
Look,
Right?
and kids are expensive, man. My daughter
Yeah.
broke a Frank Green bottle the other day, and I'm like, "That do you know how
The fact
expensive
your
these
daughter has
bottles
a
are?
Frank
They
Green
are.
bottle?
It's
Yes.
terrible.
I don't remember water bottles as a kid, but anyway.
I don't know if I drank. Yeah, I was just drank out of a hose when I was a kid
I was just saying.
back in the day. Just drink out of a tap
Out of a bottle.
directly.
The hose. Yeah.
Kids today, Frank Greens. What is this? Maybe that's the problem.
Yes. They're
No more
spoiled.
Frank Greens. Yeah. Agreed. Where were we?
Agreed to what? Agreed to what?
Kids are not that
Kids are
expensive,
not
or
that-
kids are expensive.
Kids are expensive.
so
But
I'm
that's
saying,
why
like,
people having less.
Because housing is so expensive. Like to get a 2-bedroom apartment, it's expensive from a
Yeah.
1-bedroom to 2-bedroom. Then to go to a 3-bedroom, if
Yeah.
most people need to live in apartments, to have more. That's why people are not having kids because they can't afford it.
And
Well,
also, I
yeah.
think
It's
the loss of
definitely a
income
choice.
too, right? Someone's got to stay home. Say you're
Yeah.
losing earnings, and you're losing a massive chunk. Say both of the parents are working full time, and all of a sudden you lose a full time income for
Yeah.
6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever that is.
But we need more bedrooms now. I remember sharing a room with my brother for the first couple of years before we moved into a bigger house.
Yeah.
But kids aren't sharing rooms anymore.
No.
And also,
My kids
like,
are.
oh, your kids are. Some
Exactly
kids are
because
sharing
of
My
that.
twins
rooms.
are.
Because it's so
twins.
much more expensive to
Well,
go
they
to a
shared a womb
3-bedroom.
as well.
Yeah.
But
Share a room. They share a room.
but
You're on a roll today,
there's also
Scott.
I'm on fire.
It's
Let's
a
take the jacket
jacket.
off.
It must be the jacket. But also, like, we also need, like, people are working from home, or you need like a home office or a study.
Yeah.
So that's an extra room. But anyway, we've gone way off topic. I think skilled migrants is a solution. I think it's something we should be looking at ASAP. I think government, maybe JVing or like a government developer builder into the mix. They're not going to be
Yeah.
able to build everything.
No,
But
it's
if
just
they want
in addition.
let them contribute to the 1.2 million homes.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
gives them a little bit of say there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anything else? What
yeah,
else?
there's one thing. So every new property that's built in Australia there's roughly the cost of that property, 30 to 35% of that is from government taxes. Whether it's local, state or federal taxes, is built into every new property that's delivered. Roughly 30 to 35% of that cost is government taxes. So if you want housing supply, waive GST for the next 12 months for developers, for projects that get started in the next 12 months and get delivered in a particular point in time. Like, have some clever, innovative solution. That sounds expensive, but it will probably be cheaper than having to spend 50 billion a year for the next 5 years on trying to fund housing supply. So to look into the government tax side of things, from whether it's GST or stamp duty or land tax or council contributions or state government contributions. Like, these taxes are built into everyone that's buying a property. So if I'm buying a property of 800 grand, there's 30% of that is government taxes that the developer passes on to the consumer, and they add a margin on top. They have to.
So let's give everyone a haircut. You know what I mean? Along the way. No, it's true, and it sounds controversial.
It'll sound cheaper though.
It sounds controversial to say, hey, let's give the greedy developers a little bit of an incentive.
But you want them to deliver your target.
But we're going to get them to deliver, right? And maybe some tax cuts or some incentive for developers is going to be cheaper than a government-funded developer.
I think it's something creative. If it's 10% of GST in there, reduce the prices by 5% and put 5% back into your margins for developers. But if they can prove that they can reduce the prices,
and maybe some of that profit can then be put back into the community, right? In infrastructure. Correct. Or, that could be.
Well, we go all the way back to the start. We've got DAs sitting there and nothing happening.
So that's what I mean. If you've got DAs sitting there, how do you get... So it's not about red tape anymore.
It means developers can't make money on that.
It means it's not feasible. It's a piece of land. It's sitting there. They can't get it out of the ground. So how do you help them get out of... You need to change some items in their feasibility. It's very simple.
And this is what I'm getting at. Industry leaders calling for urgent action and collaboration, right? This is something that they can collaborate on. If government says, hey, you know what? The 30 to 40% tax, we're happy to take 20 to 30, right? And it means that you can make an extra 10%, Mr. Developer or Mrs. Developer. Maybe you don't have to pass on that cost to the buyer as well. So we're solving more problems than one.
Yeah, and that 30 to 35%, it's not just like income tax. There's a whole range of taxes that are built into that. But they can look at the different components of the tax system to say, okay, what's affecting the feasibility of these projects the most? And it's not something they put in place forever. Have a 6 or 12 month window that if developers get their project started in that time, that they're exempt from particular taxes to get the project out of the ground. Otherwise, the projects will still sit there, and the housing targets will just be fugazi.
Are you sure you don't want to run for Prime Minister? That's a great idea. It's a great idea.
I can help with housing.
I feel like that would be an unpopular idea, but it's one that would really work. So when you actually see it through, it would actually be financially better for us as a country.
What's going to be really unpopular
solve the problem
is when they have this 1.2 mil target and they hit 700 or 800,000, because that's where it's heading.
But Albanese won't be there. I'm telling you, he won't be there to answer the questions and do the press release. It'll be someone else, and that's
right on that.
And that's how it is with politics. Unfortunately, let's take a little bit of a turn. So I want to speculate, guys, on what effect is this having on rental prices and property prices as a whole. This housing supply issue.
Well, you've got a shortage of supply, right? And I think that's something that we talk about a lot as the underlying problem that's not getting addressed, and you can't fix it with band-aid solutions. So that's going to impact on the rental prices, that the prices of rentals are going to go up, right? Property values are going to go up, so it makes it less affordable for people to buy their first home. Renters are going to feel the pressure, right? Landlords are going to charge what the market is willing to pay. So nothing the government is doing is going to fix any of that unless you address the supply issue that we talked about in detail.
So what advice do we have for someone that's looking at buying right now or is in the market right now? Is there anything they need to keep in mind given everything that's going on here?
I think just be aware of some of the factors, that's like some of the critical factors that are happening in the market at the moment. They've got these targets for housing supply that they're not going to meet within the next 5 years. There is going to be a continued and sustained housing supply shortage for the years to come. It's not going to be fixed overnight or even the next 2 years, to be honest. It's going to take some time to fix. So if you are looking to potentially purchase or get in, know that, and if you're waiting for people wait for prices to come down or interest rates to do something. All you can really go off is historic data and then look at what's happening now and the trends to happen in the future, and you'll see that property is just not going to go down.
I saw an article, not financial advice, right, but I saw an article earlier this week the suburbs where property prices will double in the next 5 years. And it's like, wow. I'm thinking about, and if you talk about 10 years ago, if you told us that the prices would be where they are now, you wouldn't believe it. So it's not actually unbelievable to think that in 5-10 years' time, it could be double again.
It's crazy though to really think about it. I don't know. I often have this conversation with Austin at home, and he is adamant that the price can't keep going up. I'm like, but they have to, because there's not enough.
We've been saying that for decades.
Yeah.
We've been saying that for decades.
Yes, and it is.
But look, you don't want to say it is always going to be that way. There might be a point where
there might
like
be a
it's too much.
slowdown, but it's.
But
yeah.
I would think the advice might have to be, if you're looking right now, just do your research, and maybe if you can afford something in an area where you're seeing, some good development and infrastructure, then maybe like get in.
Because the infrastructure's they're only advancing with infrastructure. So, like if you look at the different pockets, for example, in Sydney, you've got the mountains, Cronulla, Palm Beach. That's the Sydney area. There's not any more new land that they can create out of that section.
Yeah. So
it's only going to continue as more population comes in for Sydney, for example. So the price is only going to continue to go one direction.
Great band. Guys, I think we've exhausted the topic. You know what? We need to get some experts here from Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth, other cities as well, because we do talk about Sydney, New South Wales a lot, and I'd like to talk about other cities and states in Australia as well. One thing I'd like to add as well to the end of this conversation is we get some good questions from our audience. And we've had one in particular from Instagram. So I'm going to encourage people to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you DM us, slide into our DMs, ask us a question, we will answer that question on the podcast. So that is for TikTok and Instagram followers. So jump in, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a share, and ask us a question. A lot of questions. I'm going to call this segment questions for Jason, because everyone always asks Jason questions.
All right, cool. I'm just going to head off.
Yeah, see you later. Chris, you're done. We'll come up with a jingle as well. There's going to be a jingle, I reckon.
Awesome.
Questions for Jason. I don't know if it's because they think you're the smartest person on the panel.
Oh, definitely not the case, man.
Or if they just want they want to hear your sexy voice a little bit more. Yeah,
yeah. That's right.
So you're going to hear Jace. You're probably going to hear Jace mentioned a fair bit in questions, but this one comes from Dwayne Aiden, or maybe Aiden Dwayne on Instagram. Slid into our DM, so thank you, mate. G'day, guys. Thoroughly enjoying the show. Well, thank you very much. There is one topic of conversation I would enjoy hearing discussed, and that is based on borrowing against your house. Key questions such as, what percentage of equity in property A do you need to borrow against in order to purchase property B? Is there a safer zone in what percentage you borrow against from the equity in your home? Is there a safer zone? Is there a safer to save up and buy property B in cash? Is it safer, sorry? And would it be ideal for someone to be borrowing against their home in this unknown volatile interest rate economy? Lastly, for Jason as well, have you seen the House of Cards come down from doing this? Thanks again. I believe it would be a great topic of conversation. Yeah. And Michael, what a wonderful host you are. But Jace, squarely at you, mate. A lot of questions
humble
there.
As well.
Yes.
Very humble. It's the jacket. Jace.
That's good.
What should Dwayne Aiden do?
Yeah, so I think the first part of the question is how much do you need to borrow against your first property to use the equity to buy the second property, right? So it depends on what the second property purchase price is, but what we commonly see is people would take up their borrowing up to 80% of the value of their first property. So, for example,
give me some numbers, Jason.
Easy maths.
Easy maths, man.
Easy way
Let's all get a calculator.
Right.
So, easy math. Let's say you use $1 million of the value of your first property.
Slow down.
Right.
1 million.
1 million.
Okay.
Right. So let's say you owe $500,000 on it. So that's 50% LVR, so loan to value ratio.
Yep.
So if you take it up to, you borrow more from the equity up to 80%, so that's another 30% difference. So you can borrow $300,000 from property A, which you can then use to buy property B. So that's kind of like your deposit. Right? So you're actually turning the equity liquid into cash. Right? So that's what we commonly call equity release or cash out. So you're borrowing against the value of the property, the equity, putting the cash into an offset account of 300K. You got an extra loan of 300K. So you got loan one, your original loan, 500,000. You borrowed another amount, 300,000. Now that's your deposit.
It might sound silly, but people don't realize that they're liquefying cash over here.
Correct.
They're moving that cash over here. They then owe more in
Yeah.
property A. People
Correct.
don't sort of realize, they're like, oh no, this is magic money that has come
Correct.
from nowhere.
Correct.
No, they're moving that, they're
It
liquefying.
kind of is.
It well,
Yeah.
in a way it is, but
Yeah.
you owe. So say
Yeah, you
you
still owe
owed
it.
$500,000, you now owe $800,000 on
Correct.
property A,
But you got
but you've
300
moved
cash.
300K to property B.
That's right. And that's how people buy the second property, whether that's an investment property or whatever. And, you know, some of the property bros will say, without any deposit down, with not a single dollar out of your pocket, savings, you know, borrow the full amount, you know, which you can. So now you've got 300 grand, and that could equate to 20% plus stamp duty. So when you go buy your second property, you're then borrowing 80% against that property.
So now, instead of having one property at 50%
Yeah.
borrowing, loan to value,
Yeah.
you've got two properties
At
that are at
80%.
80% now.
Correct. Exactly right.
okay.
So the second part of the question, I think, was, you know, is there a safe amount of equity or amount you should borrow against your property? 80%, look, there's no, it depends on your situation.
Comes back
But
to like serviceability.
correct. But 80% can be your rule of thumb because that's where the bank allows you to borrow up to that amount without any lender's mortgage insurance, right? So why not use the bank's risk management system, their policies, because they've done the calculation, they got the statistics. Why do they charge people mortgage insurance if it's over 80%? Because they deem it as a little bit more risky. So if you adopt that philosophy and go, I'm only going to operate at 80%, even if someone says to you, oh, you know what, you can borrow up to 90% of your property, you just got to pay a little bit of LMI. Instead of having 300 grand, you're now going to have 400 grand, for example. You know, so if you want to take a safe and conservative approach, take the 80%.
But so the theory is, instead of having one property with 500 grand loan
Yeah.
that's growing at 5-6% per annum,
Yeah.
you've now got exposure to two properties that are growing at that same rate.
Correct. And what you got to watch out for is you borrowed a lot of money to buy this property.
Yeah.
You didn't put any deposit in. So, say the property bros we saw earlier was talking about putting a 20% deposit in cash so that your property could be cash flow positive or whatever. In this situation, you've borrowed every single dollar. So if the property you're buying is 500 grand, you've literally borrowed 520,000 because you borrow the stamp duty cost as well.
Probably maxed out.
So you're not going to be cash flow positive for a long time.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to be negative. But going back to what
Capital
you
growth.
said, Chris, is now you've got two properties growing in the same amount of time. And I always say that time is that, you know, nobody has an advantage over time, right? So if one person has 10 years, you've got 10 years, that person's got one property, you got two properties. At the end of the same length of time of 10 years, you're going to be ahead of that particular
Compare the
person,
pair.
right?
Right.
So
Unless you're Marty McFly or
Again,
something.
the property bros at the start of this chat would say that's a bad deal, right? Wouldn't
yeah,
they?
100%,
Right.
100%.
But like again, you got two properties growing in over a period of time versus
That's right.
one.
That's right. So as long as
Could
your
make a big
cash flow, you
difference.
can manage that, and you know your own numbers. You know, who knows? You might be living at home with parents. Your living expenses are very low. You can handle losing, say, $200-$300 a week or a month to support these two properties.
Have you seen it fall down? The House of Cards, as Dwayne.
So
Aiden
someone
says?
going too hard, like
Yeah.
they've got one property, they go to 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Have you seen someone start having to liquidate properties or sell properties because they can't keep up with their original strategy?
Look, personally, never seen that. But have heard of stories where people buying properties in, you know, highly speculative areas like mining towns and so forth. You know, back say 15 years ago, examples are where people buying in areas like Mackay, the properties they bought were so cash flow positive, it was like 700 grand, but it rented out for 2,000 a week because the mining companies were renting these properties for the workers' accommodation. But once the mine wrapped up, the rent wasn't there anymore, right?
Yeah.
So these people gear themselves or they borrow so much. Now the rent is back down to $600-$700 a week. They can't afford the repayments anymore. They have to sell the property. But now when they sell the property, there's not much value in it because that was the speculation that the property value was there because it was delivering $2,000
Yeah.
And
a
then you've
week in
taken
rent.
equity out of it, but
Correct.
it's not actually going to be paid back.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
It
you're
depends
losing
what
money.
you want to buy.
Yeah.
Depends what you want, what your strategy is, and what your appetite is for,
Yeah.
for risk. You know, do you want to max yourself out? Do you want to keep a bit in? Like again, one of the questions was: is it safer to save up in cash? You're probably going to get in a better position if you have the cash or can save up the cash. But again, there's that
An
opportunity cost
Yeah.
So
to consider as
it's,
well.
it's
So
like it's a solid strategy. Like if you depends on the strategy that you want to employ. If you're in the next 10 years want to accumulate 100 properties, or if you want to just go from 1 to 2 and that's it.
but what's the value of those 100 properties, Chris?
But if you just want to go from 1 to 2,
Yeah.
if you just want to go from 1 to 2, then you can probably go a little bit more aggressive.
It's solid
'cause
strategy,
it's the
man.
time.
Yeah.
If you can retire with 2 or 3 investment properties, you're gonna be, and they're like giving you good rental return, you're gonna be okay. You don't need the 100, right? But again, not financial advice, but again, Jace, I think you've answered that really well. We had one more question as well. I promised Scarlett, your daughter,
Oh, yes.
that if she made a comment on YouTube, we would shout her
did.
out. So Scarlett, well done. Glad you're watching, Mum. Or
She's
listening.
Like, she's like, who's that Savannah chick?
Yeah. And the question was from Scarlett, hey, Mum, what's it like being on screen?
Yeah, I know. I think she's really fascinated by this idea of being on YouTube. So
My kids think I'm famous. My 5-year-old is
yeah,
like,
exactly. If
he's
you're on
like,
YouTube,
hey, Dad,
you are famous.
Hey, Dad, what are you doing today? You're doing property now. He actually says it like that. You're doing property now.
He needs to do the intro.
I think we should get
that's
Anthony.
bad.
Anthony, if you're listening, he can't spell yet.
Yeah.
But eventually I might help him write a comment.
Yes.
And we could go there. But guys,
Yeah.
if you've enjoyed the show, keep your comments as well. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok. We're everywhere. Slide into our DMs, ask us questions, tag us in some prop talks. And like I said, I want a full episode of prop talks. I want full
Yes.
episodes of Q&As. Make it easier for me, guys. I can't use ChatGPT every week. But guys, another great conversation. We'll be back next week. Thank you so much.
Thank
Pleasure
you.
as always.
you.
Thank you, mate.
Goodbye. Okay. Thanks, Peach.
The Property Now podcast offers opinions on Australian property news for informational and entertainment purposes only, and they are general in nature. It does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. It does not constitute professional advice. Always seek expert guidance before making any property-related decisions.